Industrial Revolution started in Britain in the late 1700s. Before the Industrial Revolution, manufacturing was usually done in people's homes, using hand tools or basic machines. Industrialization marked a shift to powered, special-purpose machinery, factories, and mass production. The iron and textile industries, along with the development of the steam engine, played central roles in the Industrial Revolution, which also saw improvement in systems, while industrialization brought about an increase to the availability and differences of living for some. It also resulted in often grim employment and living conditions for the poor working class. The factory system was a system of manufacturing that began in the 18th century. Concentration of industry into special establishments. The system brought up the source of the Industrial Revolution. The factory system replaced the domestic system, in which individual workers used hand tools or simple machinery to fabricate goods in their own homes or in workshops attached to their homes. Richard Arkwright is the person with all the brains behind the growth of the factories. He created the first true factory, which employed over 800 people. To move from small workshops and houses into huge buildings was crazy. People saw the opportunity to produce products quickly and cheaply, and they did, by factories. The first factories were water-powered and often rolled mills. Through steam power, though steam power soon took over, factories sprang up close to the sources of raw materials and fuel. The factories were located along the power sources, and in this time it meant the rivers and waterways. They needed the water system. They needed the water for steam and water power, or they needed the water for steam or water power. In England, they built shallow canals so the mills had the water power and ways to get the wool to market with shallow draft boats. It was this way until things could be powered by electricity. The factory system differed greatly from farm work. In rural villages, people worked hard, but their work varied according to the season. In factories, workers faced a rigid schedule set by the factory whistle. Factory workers working hours were long. Shifts lasted from 12 to 16 hours, about 5 in the morning till 8 at night, with an interval for refreshments of 30 minutes at noon. Exhausted, workers suffered accidents from machines that had no safety guards because they cost money. And they might lose a finger or a limb or even their lives. Safety clothing was also non-existent. Clothes were frequently loose and obviously dangerous. Workers were exposed to other dangers as well. Coal dust destroyed lungs of miners, and textile workers constantly breathed air filled with lint. If workers were sick or injured, they lost their jobs. Factories also had very strict rules, but some factory owners were stricter than others. For example, Richard Arkwright was a very strict one. He had some very harsh rules, like workers being fined for whistling at work or even looking out the window. But he did build homes and churches for his workforce and expected his child workers to receive at least basic amounts of education. But other factories were not so charitable and believed their workers were lucky to even. But factory inspectors were easily bribed because they were so poorly paid, and there were so few of them that covering all the factories would have been impossible. Employers often preferred to hire women workers rather than men. They thought women could adapt more easily to the machines and were easier to manage than men. More important, they were able to pay women less than men for the same amount of work. Factory work created special problems for women. Their new job took them out of their families for 12 or more hours a day. Then they returned to their overcrowded little homes to feed and clothe their families, clean and cope with other sicknesses and problems. Family life had been hard for poor rural cottagers, and in industrial towns it was even grimmer. Factories also hired many boys and girls. The wages the children earned were needed to keep their families from starvation. Employers often hired orphans, making deals with local officials who were glad to have the children taken off their hands. Overseers beat children accused of stealing. A few enlightened factory work owners did provide some basic education and a decent life, but majority of children, like their parents, were slave to the machine. Finally, in the 1830s, British lawmakers looked into abuses in factories. Government's commissions heard about the children as young as 5 working in factories. Some children died, others were stunted of their growth or had twisted limbs, and most uneducated. Slowly, Parliament passed the law to regulate poor child labor in factories. With the rise of the factories came both positives and negatives. Ultimately, to the people of Britain, economy-wise, the country got a huge boost, and the factories brought people from across the country together working side by side. But the pressure of finding food and keeping your family from going hungry passed, as factory work provided enough financially to get by. The negatives were factory life in general. Long hours, working in extremely poor working conditions, and being presented with injury risk every day. The factories weren't great places to work. However, over the years, we could see this continue to get better and better, bringing the standards to most factories today.
You done?